Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, Trump rally in progress right now in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It's right outside Omaha. We're monitoring it, of course, as we always do. And if news happens, we'll go right there. But first, we want to bring you up to speed on what's happening here in Washington. The crack political team over at the Washington Post, our daily local newspaper, has uncovered a brand new species of fake news they think you need to know about. Imaginary left-wing mobs. In a piece posted last night, the Post explained that in order to win the midterm elections, those Republicans have, quote, cast the Trump resistance movement as an angry mob. Now, cast is, of course, here a synonym for misrepresented. The Washington Post wants you to know that these mobs are not real. They're an illusion. And that may surprise you, because you may have recently seen videos of prominent Republicans being chased out of restaurants by screaming progressives. You may have read news accounts about how a Republican congressman from Louisiana was shot with a high-powered rifle by a Bernie Sanders supporter. You may have seen college campuses descend into rioting simply because conservatives showed up to talk. And just this past weekend, you may have watched transfixed as groups of hysterical young people yelled at Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill and then pounded in rage on the front doors of the Supreme Court. All of this may have given you the mistaken impression that there is a threat of disorder and lawlessness from the left building in this country. Some of it funded by a man that the Washington Post neutrally describes, and we're quoting now, as philanthropist George Soros. Well, rest easy, says the Post. In fact, all of this talk of left-wing mobs, quote, taps grievances about the nation's fast-moving cultural and demographic shifts. In other words, this is racism, and it's designed, says the Post, quote, for the benefit of white voters, particularly men. Wow. So the angry left-wing mobs you thought you had been watching on television turn out to be merely a hallucination. They're a fever dream concocted by those diabolical magicians over at Fox News. Thank heaven. You can wake up now. None of it is real. It's 1996 again. But wait, has anyone told the angry left-wing mobs about this? They seem to believe that they exist. In Portland, they're still blocking traffic and breaking things and screaming at old ladies in wheelchairs. Apparently, they don't get the Washington Post in Oregon. Watch. Don't believe your lying eyes. Now, some reports, there haven't been many reports, but some describe the protesters you just watched as Antifa. Others say they're Black Lives Matter. It doesn't matter. What you're actually looking at is the youth wing of the Democratic Party. These are their shock troops. Listen to Maxine Waters and Cory Booker call them to arms.
Go to the Hill today. Get up and please get up in the face of some Congress people.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Wait till she's not.
Go get them! Get in their face! Well, they obeyed. The left always obeys. Obedience is the whole point of their program.
If kids don't eat in peace, you don't eat in peace. Abolish ICE! Abolish ICE! Abolish ICE! We believe survivors! Texas racist anti-gay! We believe survivors! We believe survivors!
Well, thanks to incidents like the one you just saw, the ones the Washington Post assures you aren't real, didn't really happen, and you have no right to be worried about, normal people across the country, nevertheless, are becoming concerned. Now, that's racist, says the Post, because, of course, being yelled at by rich white kids and not liking it is racist. But nevertheless, Kelly Paul, wife of Senator Rand Paul, says that she's so concerned by what's happening that she keeps a loaded gun by her bed. Watch.
So many, frankly, unhinged people and unstable people out there And when they hear someone on their side telling them, get up in their face, they take that literally. And they think that that gives them a license to be very aggressive, be harassing. It does scare me that there is going to be somebody that is really unstable that takes that message a step further. We've updated all of our security systems at home. I sleep with a loaded gun by my bed. I've always felt very safe. We used to never even lock our doors, and now that has all changed.
Well, the Washington Post might call Mrs. Paul paranoid. On the other hand, many on the left openly celebrated when her husband wound up in the hospital after being assaulted by an angry liberal.
My husband had 6 broken ribs and was violently assaulted, was seriously injured. And to have people like Cher and Bette Midler laughing on the internet and lauding his attacker, it's like, well, what kind of person are you that you think that is acceptable?
Well, that's a fair question. And the video we just showed you is real video. We didn't make it up in the basement to scare you or to win a midterm. Assessing everything you've seen over the past year, you might be tempted to conclude that just maybe there is a growing problem with left-wing mob violence. But left-wing leaders and their propagandists in the press have concluded, you'll be surprised to learn, the exact opposite. Faced with one left-wing riot after another, they have decided the problem is actually you. You're the problem, sitting at home. You're dangerous. In the New York Times this morning, Paul Krugman accused the Republican Party of harboring authoritarian impulses. Apparently, Republicans have been chasing prominent Democrats out of restaurants recently and banging on cars. Oh, wait. There's that projection thing again. Hillary Clinton is so worried, though, about how dangerous the Republican Party has become, those angry Mormon grandmothers in black bandanas you're seeing in downtown Portland, smashing windows, that she no longer considers Republicans Americans or even fully human. According to Hillary Clinton, you no longer have to be civil to Republicans. You can do whatever you want to them because they deserve it.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. That's why I believe if we are fortunate enough to win back the House and/or the Senate, that's when civility can start again.
Yeah, when we win, civility can return. So there you have it, the perfect distillation. There's the most recent Democratic presidential candidate, the leader of her party by default, endorsing viciousness openly against her political opponents. And yet, according to the Washington Post, a newspaper, this is what Republican extremism looks like. And you'd have to be crazy not to see it. Andy No lives in Portland, Oregon. He's a journalist at Quillette. He's been following this very closely, and he joins us tonight. So, Andy, we played a bunch of videos, some of which you publicized, of what's happening in the streets of Portland. I don't even know what your politics are, but were those, I just want to be clear, were those right-wing protesters, were those Republicans in the streets of Portland?
They were not.
They were not. Who were they, and what was the point of this, and how much coverage did it get in Portland, and did any civic or political leaders in Portland raise any kind of outcry about this, the violence?
Some of the footage you showed was recorded over the weekend on Saturday by Brandon Farley, and that was a protest organized by Don't Shoot Portland, which is a Black Lives Matter type of group. They were protesting the police-involved shooting of a man who is suspected of shooting 2 people. And, the police here take a pretty hands-off approach much of the time with protesters, and what you saw on Saturday in the video is that demonstrators were allowed to take over a street in downtown Portland and direct traffic and threaten drivers, stop traffic, while the police looked on from a block away because they were afraid of inflaming the situation.
Did Democratic political leaders in Portland denounce the violence?
Not as far as I know. I mean, I know the story right now is being framed in a pretty partisan way in your show, but the facts of the matter on hand is that the Portland mayor, Ted Wheeler, also doubles as a police commissioner. And while I'm not privy to some of the internal conversations that he may have with the police department here, just based on other events that have happened in the past, I would say there's sort of a dereliction of duty of upholding the rule of law.
One might be tempted to come to that conclusion. The Washington Post doesn't agree, but I do. Thank you very much, Andy. Good to see you. Thank you for putting that online.
My pleasure.
Quentin James is co-founder of Vested Strategies. He joins us tonight. So, Quentin, we don't agree politically, but I think we can both agree that people banging on cars with batons, threatening old ladies, is totally unacceptable. Why isn't that being denounced?
Look, Tucker, I think it is unacceptable. Again, we can agree on that. But there are larger problems at hand here. I think the violence that we're seeing across the country isn't really coming from the left, but actually from the right. You could show clips tonight of, Dylan Roof preparing to kill people in a church in Charleston, or clips of many of the other white supremacists who've gone on and killed people, like in Charlottesville last year with Heather Heyer. But on both sides,
hold on.
No one is calling for violence on either side, Tucker. I think that's the most
right
important
now,
part.
well, actually, yes. You heard Maxine Waters say get in people's faces in restaurants and gas stations.
Tucker, that's not violence. She's calling for peaceful protests.
Actually, if you scream at someone to the point where they have to leave the restaurant, that is, I don't know, violence. That's an act of wild aggression, I would say. Is that happening to a lot of Democratic lawmakers? Can you think of one?
I don't think people should be obnoxious with their protest, right? But look, I think this is a time for civil disobedience. Can I think of what? I'm sorry?
Can you think of a case where a Democratic politician has been, I don't know, doxxed by a Republican staffer, has been chased out of a restaurant, screamed at on an airplane? I don't see that. Look, I understand the both sides argument, but I don't see that.
In 2010, people showed up to congressional town halls with loaded weapons. And I don't know how we distinguish that from, violence, right, and showing up, armed. So, look, we aren't
that
seeing
seems like a non sequitur to me. I'm just saying right now in 2008, you've seen a lot of people.
Look, we have one-party rule in Washington, Tucker, so the Republicans are in charge.
But what about the 250-year-old tradition of explaining what you're for and explaining why what the other person is for is wrong? When did we get to a place where office holders encourage young people to really? Because Hillary Clinton just said you no longer have to be civil to people you disagree with. What do you think of that?
I think what Hillary Clinton is saying is that what we're not seeing, unfortunately, from the Republican Party is leadership to hold President Trump accountable.
No, that's not what she may be saying that. She may be saying that, but that's not what I'm quoting. And look, that's a debatable point. But she said, we don't have to guess because she said it explicitly, you don't have to be civil to Republicans because they're too big a threat to you.
That's not what she said explicitly. She was saying in a point,
well, she wasn't
you can't be civil when a party is not following legislative protocol.
So you disagree.
We're seeing an agenda from
you don't be
Donald
civil?
Trump.
Wait, but hold on. You don't like Trump, I get it. But hold on, I'm not talking about Trump. I don't care about Trump. I care about the rest of the country. You're not required to be civil to people you disagree with? Like, do you want to live in that country? Honestly.
Tucker, I am not calling for incivility. I think.
But what do you think of what Hillary? Can't you say? I get it. I know. I lived 3 years of Obama. I know what it's like to be frustrated. I thought he really hurt the country, but I was always civil.
We saw a lot of similar protests from people on the right.
Then why don't you just say, look, Hillary Clinton? That's not helpful. Will anybody break ranks, or everyone's just a little lemming on the left? You have to be like, oh, Hillary said it, I agree. Can you just say, Hillary, actually, I think we should continue to be civil, though we disagree.
The challenge here is we're not seeing that level of accountability from the Republicans with their own president right now.
I'm happy to criticize Republicans all the time because I'm not a partisan robot. But everyone on the left, they will never criticize anything. All right, okay.
President Obama got criticized when he went against the will of the party. We saw that for 8 years, Tucker. We saw blue dog Democrats.
Are you gonna? Will you just say Hillary Clinton is wrong? I mean, let's just be civil, even if we disagree, or no? We can't say that.
Look, I don't think she was calling for incivility, and so look, should we not be in? Look, that's the point here, Tucker.
Okay, they're barking at me.
No one is calling for incivility.
Okay, go rewind the show and look at the tape, and we'll talk later. Quentin, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Tucker.
Whoa. Well, so Kavanaugh's on the Supreme Court, and many are arguing that we need to keep going after him for some reason. In fact, impeach him. For what exactly? We have someone who can perhaps explain for what. Also, actor Steven Seagal now has Russian citizenship. He's talking about running, or the press is saying he may run for governor of Siberia. We're going to talk to him just ahead. Speaking right now in Iowa, if news happens, obviously we'll go there.
But we're going to allow guns to be used in hunting in places they had not been used before, so both sides came together. That's the way I like to see things happen. I like Republicans and Democrats to work together. And my view is we do not need new federal gun legislation. The right place to care for our Second Amendment rights is to live within the Constitution and to let the people in Utah and the legislators in Utah make those choices. Jenny Wilson.
Just a brief comment. I guess we're going to play multiple choice Mitt, because you said one thing when you went to run for governor, another thing as governor, then you went off to run for president, and now you're seeking to serve us in the U.S. Senate from Utah. I don't know if it's A, B, C, or D, but I see that it does change.
Ms. Wilson, I'm just going to point out, I ran for president twice. Both times I said I would not favor new federal gun legislation. That continues to be my position.
We're going to move on. This question comes from the web, the Utah Debate Commission website, from Michael Sackley of St. George. And Michael writes that it's predicted that Medicare will be unable to fulfill its obligation to seniors as early as 2026, and Social Security could follow suit in 2035. The question has two parts. Can these programs be saved? And if so, how would you work through partisan gridlock to cut spending or raise taxes to fund these programs for the longer term? That would be Jenny Wilson.
Well, thank you. It speaks to the earlier question as well, and I really believe that there are ways to reform. We can come together. It was something that I was very comfortable doing, working with Congressman Bill Orton in the 90s. I do it on the Salt Lake County Council. There are 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats.
It be spent, and where will that money come from? 1 minute, sir.
We absolutely need to. And we have one of the worst transportation systems in the country. People sitting in traffic longer than pretty much anywhere else in the country. A transit system, the MBTA, and other transit systems where people are paying higher fares for disabled trains and reduced bus service. People cannot depend on our transportation system to get to work on time.
Impeachment against him at some point if Democrats take the House. Members of the media are lashing out on that same point. Some people argue that supporting Kavanaugh is sufficient cause to stop speaking to a person. James Carville bluntly laid out the political calculation here.
Kavanaugh is worth a lot more alive than dead. They're going to keep him front and center. The Democrats win the House. They'll probably hold some kind of hearings on the fact that a lot of people think that he perjured himself. Kavanaugh is going to be an issue in 2018. He's going to be an issue in 2020. The Democrats are going to keep digging up stuff. The press is not going to stop all of the things that they're working on about Kavanaugh. It's just one of these amazing things that probably has never happened before in American politics.
Richard Goodstein is an attorney, a former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton. We should note, in the interest of honesty, he's not in charge of the Democratic message. He joins us tonight. So, Richard, let's say I'm a Democrat and I'm thinking, I want cheaper health care. I'm worried about my premiums. A lot of people are. Right. And so I vote Democrat. I'm thinking, man, my health care prices are going to get down. But the first thing they do instead is, let's impeach Brett Kavanaugh. I'm bewildered by that.
Yeah. So I don't think they look. I can't quite figure out James Carville a lot of times, and this time in particular. That's not what they're just saying. Nancy Pelosi very specifically said, we're not talking impeachment of Trump, we're not talking impeachment of Kavanaugh. And even Jerry Nadler, who may chair the House Judiciary Committee, had said, we're going to look into that investigation that was, we could put it in air quotes, because it was a joke, what the FBI did. But he's not even talking about impeachment. There are some who are, I'll concede that, but Chris Coons and cooler heads are saying, A, it's a waste of time, it's not healing, and B, frankly, if the Senate is anywhere close to where it is now, it's
But continuing the investigation into Brett Kavanaugh, to what end? I mean, first of all, I don't think as a political matter it's working for Democrats, and we'll find out. Yeah. But as of tonight, it doesn't seem to be winning a lot of new voters to the Democratic Party. But how does that help the country exactly?
Well, I think the whole point of what the Democrats will do in the House is be a check on Trump that has not been in effect. So whether that's his dealings personally with women, whether it's his tax strategies, whether it's dealings with the Russians, both his staff and, frankly, the loans and so
Wait,
forth.
so Democrats are going to go after Trump on his personal life, really?
I'm just saying.
Is this a new theme? If you've been naughty, we're against you. We're the party of virtue?
Do you remember that there was something called Bill Clinton and people went...
I remember very well. Right, and smart Republicans regret that. They lost seats. It was stupid. It was a waste of time. I mean, obviously, Bill Clinton's a totally creepy guy who mistreated women. Got it. But should we have impeached him over that? No. Most people think no. And all Democrats think no, and yet they're repeating the same behavior. Why are they doing that?
Well, again, I think the Democrats' attitude is, let's kind of show the country how things are supposed to work. We're supposed to be...
prosecute people for their personal lives.
It's not a question of anything having to do with their personal life. It's like, really? If you're going to have the FBI do an investigation, have the FBI do an investigation, not constrain it so that you know what the answer you're going to get.
But one of your leading presidential candidates is running around. He came on this show and said the problem with Trump is he violated his marriage vows. Now, look, I'm totally for marriage vows. I've been married 27 years. But I didn't know this was the new Democratic standard. So the adultery rule is now in place in the Democratic Party. Is this going to apply to everybody?
Look,
no, seriously.
Yeah, no. I think the fact of the matter is, what the Democrats are going to run on this year is, as you said, health care, dealing with corruption, self-dealing.
Making sure you haven't committed personal sins.
No, and the fact is...
Are you guys evangelicals now? Be honest. As evangelicals who don't believe in God, like sort of an atheist religious movement?
Let me think about... Okay, yeah. So the fact of the matter is, I think as regards Brett Kavanaugh, it's not so much what he did back in high school. Okay?
Oh, it's not? Okay, so his yearbook is cool now. We're okay with that?
I think what it has to do with lying... Look, again, Bill Clinton was impeached for lying, and somehow this is, whatever, boys will be boys.
I love this. I love the Democratic Party. So whatever the other side does that we hate, we're going to be certain to do it 10x.
I think not. I think what you're trying to do is clean up the way in which Congress acts vis-a-vis the president. This has been a rubber stamp so far, and I think the public is actually looking for a check, which is why it looks like the Democrats are going to control the House. Incidentally,
I thought that until
if Hillary Clinton had become president, we'd only be talking about could the Republicans be getting a 60-vote margin in the Senate and basically 2/3 of the House.
If he become president, we would be wearing uniforms and marching in step. Okay, as you know. So that's one thing I'm happy about. I know that on some level you are too. Richard, thank you.
My pleasure.
Great to see you. What effects will the continuing attack on Brett Kavanaugh and on civility itself have politically and, more importantly, on the country? Britt Hume has been around a few elections, and he'll tell us after the break.
Prime Minister Abe just had a big election, won by a landslide. He's a friend of mine, but I said, look, we're protecting Japan. They're making a fortune. They're sending us millions of cars. We're not allowed to send them. They have barriers. Millions of cars into here. They pay essentially
in the midterm elections. Who's right? Britt Hume is the senior political analyst at Fox. That's well-deserved. He joins us tonight. Britt, both sides seem convinced that they're winning on this. Who is?
Well, I think the Democrats are pretty maxed out on motivation. Remember, this is the Democratic voters' first crack at a ballot box since Donald Trump's election, which so offended them and left them almost speechless with rage. And they've been raging for 2 years. They're eager to vote, I think. So I think any additional motivation they get out of the Kavanaugh affair is likely to be only a modest increase because where the needle already was. Republicans, on the other hand, were looking pretty sleepy.
Yeah.
And uninterested, and a lot of them don't like Trump, and so he's got a kind of a divided party and so on. And the Kavanaugh case clearly has changed the equation there, and all the polling evidence we see shows that motivation among Republicans is up. So as far as Kavanaugh is concerned, Republicans got more out of it, but they had a bigger gap to close because the enthusiasm gap was clearly been with the Democrats for
This is the last day to register in a bunch of different states, and I think registration has been pretty intense today. What did you think of Hillary Clinton's remark made to a British journalist that civility, the rules of civility ought to be suspended when dealing with Republicans? It seemed like kind of a moment to me.
Well, she always seems to be a couple of beats behind the music. Because this is where some people in her party are going, right?
Right.
And it looks like she's trying to get on that train, right? And pretty soon, when things get back to normal, she'll be back in the middle of being an establishment politician. I think. I don't think she's going to stay with this line of.
So this is what you're seeing from a bunch of these sort of elder statesmen in the Democratic Party. They're not exactly sure what's going on. The kids are all hopped up and mad and blocking intersections, and rather than try to restrain them, they're making the case, hey, I'm hip and radical.
Yeah, I'm with you. People that want back then the slogan was, I'm with her.
Yeah.
Now she's saying to them, I'm with you. No,
So something like this happened 50 years ago, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's done. I remember when we had a lot of trouble in the streets during Vietnam and after.
Yeah.
Right? And it was a bad issue for Democrats in the end.
Because normal people didn't care.
Yeah, normal people didn't like it. They elected Nixon twice.
Yeah. You think that'll happen this time?
No, I don't. He's not around. Well, I think that there's no, in my opinion, Tucker, this is insane politics.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff is, and for Dick Durbin to have said in the middle of the hearing when people were jumping up and screaming about every few minutes, this was early in the hearings, right?
Yeah.
And Republicans were complaining about it, and he was saying, no, this is democracy. No, this is not democracy.
No.
And most Americans, I mean, the overwhelming majority of Americans don't think it's democracy, which is why people like, guests you've had before don't really want to say out loud that they support this kind of thing, but they make excuses for it.
Yes. Democracy is listening to what citizens think and then enacting it. This is shutting them down.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Britt, thank you very much.
You bet, Tucker.
Great to see you. Well, we had a spirited debate last night about John Mayer, who has come out against something called toxic masculinity. Tammy Bruce joins us to decode the whole thing next. Attacking men, gender, monitoring that speech for news, and go to it if any occurs. Stay tuned.
Protect us. So Germany is paying 1%. We are paying 4.3% to protect Europe. Explain that one to me, okay, please?
John Mayer is a highly accomplished musician and a highly accomplished womanizer. Being a highly accomplished womanizer is no longer something to brag about in this country, so John Mayer would like you to know that he is a changed man. In fact, there is no single greater friend, no greater foe of piggish male behavior than John Mayer. He's deeply sensitive, and he'd like you to know that.
I don't want it to be the male contract. I'm telling you that's the contract, and we have to tear the contract up. You do not possess the universal ability to have any woman that you see. And I'm just going on record as revealing the trauma of men feeling like they've fallen short of a alpha male contract that nobody can live up to. And until we get rid of that in men, we won't have the life that we all deserve.
So that was Mayer breaking into a one-man therapy session in the middle of a concert the other night. We thought it was kind of amusing and had sort of a cynical take on it because, maybe it was a preemptive defense of his own behavior. Feminist Enushe Hossein, though, said we just didn't get it. Most men don't. John Mayer is actually a feminist hero, she argued. Watch.
Toxic masculinity isn't about saying your body is a wonderland. It's actually about men being violent towards women. And that song was written for his girlfriend at the time.
Everyone is against men being violent toward women, but I wonder if the standard isn't different. If Brett Kavanaugh's calendar from 1982 had, basketball with squee and then your body is a wonderland and your bubblegum tongue, I mean, you would have called for his arrest, right? Tammy Bruce is a radio show host, president of Independent Women's Voice. She joins us tonight. Tammy, great to see you. Just to be clear, I'm not making a case against John Mayer. I think it's pretty good, actually. I'm making a case against this phrase that we're seeing everywhere, toxic masculinity, which doesn't seem like an actual thing. It seems like an attack on all men, not just the violent ones. And I'm against that because I think it's wrong.
Well, and it is wrong. But it's useful for the left. It's like climate change. It can be whatever they want at any moment.
So true.
There's no reality to it at all. It's whatever your mood is. And that's the purpose of calling it that. But at the same time, in and of itself, it does indict every man, right? It indicts the nature of maleness and manhood. Now, I love men. I think men are great. I love the masculine man who saved me once from another man who was trying to get into my car at a gas station. Maybe my life was saved in that moment. I love the men who are in the military, who are first responders, and the women who join them in that effort. We sleep nicely at night because of masculine men every day. The bottom line is, though, that interview you had with her was fascinating because she also admitted that this standard of what is toxic masculinity, and why not just call it violence against women, but they don't because they want it to be the overall indictment, is she said it would only really apply, it only applies really to Kavanaugh because he was a nominee for the Supreme Court. And of course, the implication to that is that, well, he would have a larger impact on society. Look, Tucker, entertainment figures have a huge impact on culture, on children.
musicians and dancers and actors, they are having a huge impact, and they don't have any watchdogs looking at them with what they're doing and what decisions they're making. They don't do things that are completely transparent. We don't see them making their decisions like we do the Supreme Court.
No, it's totally right.
Yeah, and lastly, this argument that we should look at all men as the problem is what makes a Harvey Weinstein possible. It's what makes a Bill Cosby possible.
Well, that's right.
Is that we dilute the view and we ask people to look at the innocent man like Kavanaugh, using him as a stand-in, while then the other men, and maybe this is what Mr. Mayor was doing, if they say the right things, it's like an invisibility cloak. They don't have to, they're not dealt with properly.
It's so true. We're almost out of time, but really quick, have you noticed this? That the threat is not from masculine men. The men I've met who mistreat women most consistently are the weakest men, the least masculine men.
Yes.
Have you noticed that?
You know, that's a very good point. And this is where we're looking at each individual case. Every woman has to deal with however we approach the issues in our lives with violence and the nature of the man who might be violent toward us.
Yeah.
But the argument is about separating women even from the men in their own lives, the men that love them, and that's the political agenda here.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with masculinity or strength.
You're totally
it's
right.
Control issues, right?
No,
Control.
exactly. It's dividing and conquering. Tammy Bruce, as always, so deep. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
So we've done the math, and it turns out that America is spending more helping illegal aliens who snuck into our country have children here than it's spending on a border wall to control our territorial integrity. Is Congress considering anything to do to change that? That's next. Then Steven Seagal joins us to talk about his new movie and the role he may be playing in U.S.-Russia relations for real. Trump rally still going on in Iowa.
So now,
we're monitoring it.
If you like your children or love your children, you can leave your beautiful farm to your children and they won't have to pay any taxes. They won't have to go to your local banker, borrow money.
Well, the creepy porn lawyer is many things, obviously intensely creepy, trust me. But he's also, to be fair, an astute political observer. He was throwing around spurious gang rape allegations a couple of weeks ago at Brett Kavanaugh. That didn't work. It actually hurt his party. So he's pivoted to a new tactic, embracing the left's newfound support for incivility and political violence. And what better way to show that support than by picking a fight, literally? So today, the creepy porn lawyer challenged Donald Trump Jr. in a 3-round MMA bout. Don Jr. has not accepted that challenge yet, but of course, we're on that story, and we'll tell you if it develops. And then this, a fascinating new report by the Center for Immigration Studies has found that helping illegal immigrants have children in this country is a bigger priority for our government than defending the border itself. Stephen Camarata is Director of Research at the Center for Immigration Studies, and he joins us today. Stephen Camarata, thanks a lot for coming on. So how did you measure this priority?
Yeah, right now we're just looking at Census Bureau data. They ask people every year, a very large census, several million people in this American Community Survey, if they're immigrants and if they had a kid in the last year. And then you can use the characteristics of people to pick out those who are likely illegal immigrants. That's what the government does to estimate illegal immigrants. So when you do that, you find that there are about 300,000 births to illegal immigrants each year at a cost of about $12,000 for the 2/3 that are paid for by taxpayers. Right. It's about $12,000 is what it costs to have a kid in the United States. That does include some of the care for the child after he's born.
Yes.
And so if you add all that up, it's about $2.5 billion a year we pay for the births to illegal immigrants, which, as you pointed out, is more than we've spent on any kind of new wall construction or barriers at the border.
Does that make us good people or masochistic, crazy people?
Well, the thing of it is, a couple things I would say about that. Look, if someone's here and they're having a kid, we're going to pay for it if they don't have insurance, and 2/3 of illegal immigrants don't have insurance, so we're going to pay for it. And since the kid's born here and is a U.S. citizen, it may make sense, obviously, to do that. But the larger question is, as a matter of policy, year after year, to tolerate this and not try to encourage people to go home and not try to stop them from entering, that does seem masochistic.
So just as almost a metaphysical question, but if you tolerate something consistently over decades, you're welcoming it, aren't you?
Right. I mean, obviously, if we have a situation where illegal immigrants can get everything from driver's license to access all kinds of benefits on behalf of their children, get in-state college tuition, we have whole jurisdictions that won't cooperate with immigration enforcement. You have to say that it's almost amazing that we don't have more illegal immigrants in the United States than the 10 to 12 million that we estimate.
Because our political class wants them. That's the conclusion. Steve Cameron, great to see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Actor Steven Seagal received Russian citizenship a couple of years ago. He wants to improve relations between his native country, this one, and his adopted one. Some say he may run for office there. We're going to talk to him about that after the break. Immigration in Russia, by the way. We vowed to keep you updated on the threat from zombie raccoons, because this show is not just about politics. We've got the whole country's concerns in mind. And of course, zombie raccoons are a threat to national security and the well-being of this nation. Last summer, hundreds of them terrorized Central Park in Manhattan. And now, like so many hipsters living on their parents' dime, the zombie raccoons have moved to Brooklyn, the hippest of the boroughs. Several of these raccoons carry the distemper virus, and they've been found in Prospect Park. It's a popular dog walking location for people in skinny jeans. That's terrifying because while the distemper virus is no threat to humans, it does affect dogs. It's one thing to infect hipsters in Brooklyn, but we draw the line at endangering canines, as you should too. Well, most of Hollywood is deeply concerned about Russia. That follows a memo they presumably were sent the day after Hillary lost the election. One exception, though, is Steven Seagal. He's received Russian citizenship. He's moved in the other direction pretty aggressively. He's now Russia's special envoy to the U.S. He's even talked about running for office there. He recently joined us to tell us about that, plus his new film. All of those came up in this conversation. Here it is. I want to get to your film first. I just read one critic say it was the best you've done in a very long time. Tell us about it.
Well, I also think it's the best film I've done in over 20 years. It's a kung fu movie, but really it's just the wisdom of what I consider to be a man who rises to the occasion of helping those who are in tremendous need and becomes, reluctant hero. It has all those different scenes in it that kind of pull the heartstrings of the people, the public, and it's got great action, great story, some great characters, some great Chinese stars. I'm proud of it. It's a wonderful movie.
Well, there are a lot of people who need rescuing right about now, I would say. So tell us, the other news story about you recently is that you are considering running for governor of Siberia.
I've noticed that.
Yeah, that's for sure. You're considering running for governor of Siberia. Tell us about that. Why, if that's true, what you would do if elected.
This is one of the millions of fake news sort of stories. I was at a film festival in Vladivostok, which is where my father's family is from. And somebody in the audience said, "Hey, man, we don't have a governor here. You want to become the governor?" I said, "Sure." And there it went. So, but at the same time, we said 30 times, guys, we were joking. And, Vladivostok, had a friend of mine become governor there the next day. So it was just a joke that the press enjoyed doing bad things to certain people with.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. So you are a Russian citizen. You were awarded Russian citizenship. You're in Russia now. Give us your perspective on the debate over Russia taking place in the United States right now.
Well, I mean, I said this before. I believe this is a situation where there's a tremendous amount of propaganda against Russia. And in my opinion, most of the things that are being said is fabricated and untrue. And I think that this whole thing with Russian collusion and the President of the United States being involved in Russian collusion, all this, I think it's all a fantasy. And I think that this has more to do with the great divide between Republicans and Democrats and the conservatives and the liberals, and how at this point, certain groups will do anything in the world. They don't care if it's legal, illegal, immoral. They don't care anything to win this battle where their agenda triumphs. And so, I really think, and I've said this before, we're at a tipping point in the United States of America where if people don't realize that Republicans and Democrats really at one point have to start to work together in a more civil fashion and agree to disagree and understand that, the truth and civility will really, really help the process true politics instead of destroying our nation.
So you're in Russia a lot. You talk to Russians. What do they make of this? Are they following it? What do they think of it?
They're just completely bemused. They are, some of them are laughing and some of them are crying, but the basic consensus is that they're finding it astounding and hard to believe that so much is being made of this, and a lot of these, accusations against people like Kavanaugh, and they just are finding it, the people I talk to are finding it just incredulous.
Yes, I feel the same way. You know Putin. What's he like?
I think he's a brilliant strategist. I think he's an intelligent man. I think he is a great world leader. And I think that if we would come to terms with trying to deal with Russia and some of the other countries in Eastern Europe and so forth and so on, as if they are equal partners, I think that this would really go a long way in world peace.
Washington's obsession with Russia.